Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
My name is Zane. Call me if you need me. She was objectively pretty, I guess. That's the first thing I noticed, because that's generally the first thing I notice. Not really my type. I prefer sturdier stock. She was slender and willowy, with not a lot up top or down below. But her eyes were the color of the sky and her hair pitch, straight as a board and down nearly to her. It was tucked back in a no-nonsense ponytail, which made sense since she was waitressing. I hate when waitresses have their hair down. Makes me think about all of it shedding into everyone's food. Her cheekbones could cut glass and her lips were full and thick. Not really my type, but objectively pretty. Made it all the more a shame. Not my type, but I'd have had fun making her scream for another reason entirely at the end of this. Leaving her with something better to remember me by then what was going to go down in here. I pushed aside my empty plate. Just pie and coffee couldn't do this on an overly full stomach, and sat back, scanning the restaurant. I'd picked a small mom and pop place, not too tiny but small enough that the kerfuffle about to ensue wouldn't make major news. The food was good too, which was a bonus. Great pie, better coffee. I'd miss it. She noticed me watching her. Those sky eyes flicked towards me and away again almost immediately. Not a fighter. She didn't want conflict. That was as obvious as it was possible for it to be. Fight or flight would kick in and she'd pick flight. Every time. Everything about her added to that impression. Good. That meant she'd listen. She'd be meek and spooked, and she'd do whatever I told her to. She'd be easy to handle when things got crazy. Ding. The little bell above the door rang. A cheerful little noise morbidly juxtaposing the scene that was about to go down. He was here. Showtime. Ding. The door closed and the little bell rang again, and I moved in towards the girl. She saw me move towards her and, after a step or two, began gathering up the cups and plates left on the table she'd been preparing to clean faster. She wasn't a fighter, but she also wasn't stupid. She knew something wasn't right here. Like a deer aware of a hunter, not scared. Not yet. She didn't know there was a threat, but she knew there was something, and she wanted to be away from it. Too late. I closed with her faster than she could make her get away, put one hand on her shoulder, and pulled the gun from the waistband of my jeans. I made no attempt to be subtle, pointing the muzzle directly between those sky eyes of hers. They widened in fear and horror, and, like the deer she was, she froze. What? Why dash? Oh my God! Someone screamed, and I lifted the gun from the girl's face just long enough to fire a shot into the ceiling. People screamed, short and sharp, the alarm call of the human herd. A predator is here. A predator has one of us. Shut up and do not move. I didn't yell, just raised my voice, calm and authoritative. Anyone moves, Princess here gets a bullet, and we wouldn't want to ruin her chances at an OnlyFans, would we? Wouldn't want to mess up that pretty face. I lowered the gun back down, motioned at the girl with it. Now come here, pretty, and do as I say. I won't hurt you if you do what I say. All flight, no fight. But for a second something behind her eyes flared. Anger, indignant. She did have a little spark in her. I'd have to watch out for that. But, like I thought she would, she obeyed. She moved where I could wrap my arm around her shoulders, keeping the gun positioned just so at the side of her head. Don't call me that. My name is Dash. I have the gun. I decide what your name is, princess. She stiffened against me, anger making her shoulders and jaw lock, but she didn't have the balls to act on it. I knew she wouldn't. And you, I added, cocking my head at the cashier. I know there's an emergency button under that countertop. Press it, and I will blow your head off. I don't want to hurt anyone, but trust me, I'm not of a delicate constitution about it. Then I finally turned, and I looked at him. He hadn't moved this entire time. Stood, just where he'd come in, the big, hulking lumberjack of a man. He was also objectively pretty. If I'd been into guys, I'd have said even my type. Big, burly, with hands big enough to cover your entire face and hair the color of wheat or the sun right at dawn. It hung, shaggy and soft, around a chiseled jaw, lightly dusted with fine stubble, framing a friendly face that looked wrong without a smile. His eyes were cornflower blue, the whole look pulling together for that of a good old, Southern boy, right off the cover of some cowboy harlequin. Objectively pretty. More the shame. He watched me watch him, and then finally spoke. "Come on now, miss," he said, slow and low, meeting my eyes with an unnerving directness. His voice was silk over sandpaper, honey over gravel, and it rolled up my spine pleasingly. "Come on now, miss. What's your name, love?" As he spoke, a soft Scottish brogue entered the words. It hadn't been there at first. No one else would notice or remember it. If you asked any of them, they'd say he had it from the start. But he hadn't. He hadn't until he'd met my eyes, so directly. Until he'd gotten it from me. "I'm holding a girl at gunpoint, and you think I'm just going to give you my name?" My own accent was faint and soft. I hadn't been home in years and it showed. "That makes sense, hero. Sit down." He did not sit down. I didn't think he was going to. He stiffened instead. It was subtle, an animal preparing to pounce. As for my part, I relaxed. I needed to be loose for this, not tense, not tight. No, the tension came from the people around me. The moment he'd tensed himself, the fear and panic of the crowd had shifted. I could feel them now, closing in, shoring up. They looked at him as if his every word held the truth of the future, and he could save them from any threat. With adoration and admiration. They looked at him like someone they would do anything for. Like he could tell them anything and they'd swallow it up. It was slow, like a spreading wave. The people closest to him were getting it first, then slowly outward. I'd picked a small place for this and I was glad I had. I'd only have to deal with 5, maybe 6 patrons if anyone decided to pull any crap, plus 1 or 2 staff. He, meanwhile, seemed to get a little taller, a little broader. He didn't see me notice it. He didn't see me seeing him, watching him drink in their admiration, their fear, literally, growing stronger from it. I see a young lady who seems to be in a desperate position, desperate enough to threaten an innocent girl. He gave me a smile that was supposed to be reassuring, that for anyone else who didn't know better would have been. "But you're more than just some thug, aren't you? You have no idea. Why don't you let her go now, eh? What is it you want?" The opening could not have been better if it had been scripted. "You," I hissed, and the jaws of my trap snapped shut. I saw him realize it. Like the girl I held against me had realized she'd been in the gaze of a hunter earlier, he saw it now. His eyes went wide, and he bore his teeth in a vicious snarl. "Hunter," he growled then, "no." The word left him like a punch. It sucked the air out of the room, out of my lungs, and simultaneously the girl in my arms began to squirm and writhe. I'd picked her because she was meek and soft. Flight, not fight. Avoidant. Fearful. I'd picked her because she'd been the target with the best chance of 2 things. 1, drawing in an emotional vampire with a literal need to be needed. She was frail and weak, or seemed to be, a beautiful damsel in the middle of a public place. He'd be drawn in like bees to a flower. The idea of that much adoration and respect, coupled with the fear and panic of the situation, it was a buffet. 2, because her innate lack of desire for conflict would, hopefully, override the way he exuded, demanded that anyone in the radius of the building fight for him, protect him. My gun would keep most of them at bay, anyway, but her I needed nice and calm. Yet here she was, squirming. I swore between gritted teeth, shifted the gun, and did something you should never, ever do. I swatted her upside the back of the head with the butt. I could have shot her. I should have shot her. Been done with it, put myself at less risk, but as she twisted in my grip, her sky eyes met mine. They held, this time, held for a long moment. She really was very pretty. Objectively. At that moment, with fire in her. So I knocked her out cold instead of killing her. Pretty little thing like her. Probably waitressing her way through college. She'd had worse hangovers. She'd be fine. She dropped to the floor like a spilled sack, and I whirled to catch the fist of the cook that had emerged from the kitchen, who had, until this moment, been content to hover in the doorway, unsure what action to take. He wasn't unsure now. Now, he was very, very confident that he wanted to break my nose, which had been broken quite enough times. Thank you very much. I'm not a small gal, but this guy was built like he wrestled bears for a living instead of flipped burgers. He sent me backwards, crashing into a table. I staggered and couldn't avoid the second blow. This one from the man who had been eating breakfast with his wife, a few tables over from me. It caught me in the jaw and sent me to the floor, and only a quick jab to his Johnson with my boot kept him from landing on top of me. I rolled up, grabbed my gun again, and fired 2 more times into the ceiling. It gave a few of them pause. Natural human fear overcoming their deep, barely recognized desire to protect this man who they'd just met. He hissed, like a snake or a cat, and dove for the door in the chaos. I took advantage of the pause I'd created to draw down on the creature. He'd turned and was halfway back out the door, the little bell ding-dinged in that obnoxious, cheerful way. Easy target. I was a good shot, and the bullets in this gun were designed, very specifically, to kill things like him, each with a little symbol carved into them, a little spell. I fired. Bang on. I was a good shot. The bullet hit squarely in the middle of the chest, piercing the heart of the girl with the sky eyes. My world reeled. My heart clenched, my breath whooshed out of my chest like it had when I'd been little, a kid, and struggled with asthma, a fist around them. My world went red at the edges. I wanted to say that it was the empathetic vampire that made me feel the white-hot rage, the gut-twisting nausea. I wanted to say I didn't give a stuff that she had come around without me noticing. That, woozy and weak, she'd been particularly vulnerable to his influence. Didn't care that I hadn't noticed her make it to her feet, hadn't noticed her lunge, throw herself in front of the empath, that he'd used her as a human shield and made me kill an innocent girl. I wanted to say I didn't care, that he forced the rage out of me like he forced emotion out of everyone else. Humans were slow, stupid, clumsy, blind, deaf, and dumb. I hated other humans. I didn't care. But I knew that was wrong. I knew it because, thanks to the necklace around my neck, under my shirt, he couldn't do stuff to me. Stupid, stupid, stupid. You should have been paying attention. You should have paid attention. This was a stupid idiot plan, you stupid idiot. I heard myself shout with rage. The smirk on his face vanished as he heard it, too, and assumed the look of any child who had pushed a parent too far. He dropped any attempt at control over the people in the diner, but I was barely aware of them reeling, of someone puking near me. I think someone may have screamed. There was crying. It all seemed very far away as I pulled the trigger again in rapid succession before he had time to get out the door. I am, a good shot. Once through the leg. He staggered, his knee exploding from behind. Once through the center of the back. He dropped like a stone, making a wailing noise as he did so, screeching like a wounded animal in the jaws of a lion. He knew he was dead. Still, he was defiant. Prey lashing out one last time before their throat was opened and their life spilled out. Hate, you hunter. You're a little bitch, but I like them prettier. I snapped back, panting, and I kicked him over onto his wounded spine to get access to his chest. Nobody in this can move, or I swear to God I will kill you all. I added, raising my voice. I knew, without having to look, that now that her mind was hers again, that the cashier was going for her phone, to try and call 911. Or for that emergency push button again maybe. She froze, mid-move, also sensing that I had been pushed too far. Ma'am, you don't have to do this. Someone said, to my left. No one else has to die today, please. It was cute to me. How many people wanted to try and help me? How many thought they could stop me by making me feel remorse or pain?
No.
No, if anything, I was more determined than ever. You're a little hunt, he rasped out, laughing, spitting blood. Got a girl killed. Good job. You got me. That was you, not me. I snapped, cocking the gun. That was you. You son of a bitch, and the last person you're going to hurt. Don't hurt anyone. Killer. Liar. He was. He manipulated people for his own gain, used them for what he wanted, took their emotions and fed on them. He'd caused the suicide of 2 teenagers by the time I'd even taken his case. Used them and tossed them aside like so much dirty laundry. Emotional vampires are, ultimately, the least dangerous threat a hunter can face. About all they can do is manipulate people's emotions and feed on said emotions. The problem comes in with what that causes in people. Suicide, obsession, PTSD, trauma. It leads to things like rape and unwilling accomplices in crimes. Causes people to launch themselves in front of a bullet. He didn't get to retort. I pulled the trigger, and my bespelled bullet found his heart. He didn't die fast or easy. They almost never do. I didn't watch. It didn't give me any pleasure, not even now. I put the gun back in the waistband of my pants, turned to face the stunned, terrified patrons of the diner. I got what I wanted. I told them, in the silence of the room, call the cops now if you want. They won't find me, but I might find you if they try. I hold a grudge, you know, and I'm sure at least half of you have families. A young couple to my left clutched each other, her hand going to her belly. I leered at them to rub the point in. So maybe be good little sheep and pretend you never saw anything here today. I don't want to have to make good on this very direct, very real threat. I motioned to the door. Get out. Go home. No one moved. Idiot sheep, frozen in fear and panic. Deer in headlights.
Humans.
Get out. I roared it this time, and it worked. The flood of panicky, scared people rushed past me, out the doors, stumbling and tripping over the body of the vampire. I leaned against the counter behind me, pulling a pack of smokes out of my shirt pocket and lighting one up. Yeah, I know I said I had asthma as a kid. You know? Besides, my lungs were lowest on my list of things likely to kill me. The herd jostled me as they rushed out, some sobbing, others stone-faced, in shock, and others just looking exhausted and drained. They were, rather literally. Still others looked at me with rage, hate, anger, and I grinned at them lazily. Going to do something about me, tough guy? My grin said, and they always answered by flicking their eyes away and moving on. People aren't usually as tough as they think they are, and even if I didn't have a gun, even if I hadn't just shown them I was willing to kill their instinct, their subconscious, told them I was a little bit out of their weight class. It didn't take long for the diner to empty. Like I said, it wasn't a big one, and there weren't a lot of people inside. In just 5 or 6 minutes, there was nothing left but myself and 2 dead bodies. I sighed, heavily, stubbing my cig out on the countertop. Story of my life. Me and only dead bodies for company. I sighed, glancing up to the ceiling. Oh God, there was something like $100 up there in the plaster, and what of that ceiling? I'd expected to fire off a shot for attention and to show I was serious. That was almost always how hunts in public locations went. So I'd prepared for the cost of that one. But 2 more in the ceiling, and then one that had hit, well, someone it wasn't supposed to. 3. 3 wasted shots total. 3. Bullets like mine aren't cheap, and now there were 2 just poof gone. Wasting my time and my money. I moved over to the vampire, who was no longer so much as twitching, and for good measure, I gave him a swift kick in the head. Bounty wasn't even worth the loss. Slightly vindicated, I bent over him, pulled a knife out of my back pocket, and carved a symbol into the small of his back. The sign for fire. Before I whispered the word to ignite the spell literally, I used the knife to carefully, gently, remove the pinky finger from the vampire's right hand. Proof. In theory, you could just cut the finger off any old Tom, Dick, or Harry and claim you brought down a beastie, but there were ways to test and check for that. Anyone who put bounties out on these creatures had access to those spells. You just had to bring them something to use them on. I like taking fingers, or sometimes claws. Small and easy to carry, not conspicuous. Plus, a few of my clients have told me they're one of the easier things to test. I wrapped the finger in a small, square cloth from my back pocket, and then whispered a single word towards the body. Ignite. The word I used doesn't matter. I could have said, burn, you manipulative bastard, and he would still have burst into flames. It was the spell I carved into his skin that counted. I pushed back to my feet, slipping the wrapped finger back into my pocket and sighed. I'd have to do the same thing for her. For the body of the beast, this was easy. Like disposing of trash, cleaning up after you. But those last moments she'd been alive passed before my mind's eye. Her eyes were lighter still. When she'd been full of fire like that, her full lips parted slightly as she panted. Her long, slender neck arched trying to escape my grip. I shook my head, pushing the images away. Didn't matter that she was pretty, didn't do anyone any good to think of her like that, but in an entirely different scenario. She wasn't my type, any. What are you doing? Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I jumped half a foot in the air, gun in my hand before I could stop myself, pointing unerringly between the eyes of the sky-colored eyes of E. She smiled and waved. Please don't shoot me again. It really hurt. How the hell are you alive? I demanded, not lowering the gun. I'd shot her. Right through the heart. I knew I had. I didn't miss. I don't miss. Not ever. I'd watched her go down, watched the blood spread across her shirt. It was still stained deep red. She should be dead. Even if she wasn't human, she should be dead. Those bullets were meant to take down anything being shot through the heart didn't. She shrugged, no fear on her face. She wasn't a fighter, that was still true. She didn't want conflict, didn't want trouble, but she had no fear of the gun in my hand, and no wonder. I'd shot her through the heart, but here she was, alive and well. I'd probably not give many shots about a gun, either. I don't know. It's not the first time, though. She reached up, put a hand gently on the barrel of my gun. Please stop that. Really? What were you doing? It's not your dash, I spluttered for a second, like a teenage boy being confronted by a pretty girl for the first time, tripped up by his boner. She wasn't afraid of me. Even if she wasn't scared of my gun, she should have been afraid of me. I just murdered a man. I've died like 4 or 5 times. She gave me a weak half smile. It's never fun, but it never sticks. That bullet should have put you down, no matter what you are. I bit out. It's spelled and blessed. I don't know what to tell you. Her smile faded, fell, and something dark passed behind her eyes. I've been stabbed twice, overdosed once, got hit by a car, and dash. She stopped, lips thinning, and her eyes darted away. And other stuff. It never sticks. It hit me then, and for the second time in one day that familiar, old feeling of not quite being able to catch my breath hit me square in the chest. What was the first time? I asked, my voice coming out hoarse and raw. Why do you need to know that? She folded her arms over her chest, then grimaced and pulled them away from the sticky wet on her shirt. Was it bad? I asked, instead of answering her question. She froze, those beautiful pale eyes fluttering shut, her brow furrowing, and it was the only answer I needed. You always answer a question with a question? She asked, but I barely heard her quip. Revenant. She was a revenant. They weren't real. They had always been whispered about among hunters, among people in the know, but they weren't real. I had a friend who claimed she'd fought off a horde of zombies in a small town once, someplace she called Gravity Drops or something. I didn't remember, and I'd heard an old hunter once claim he knew a guy who could bring people back to life, but only for a couple minutes at a time or something bad would happen. But neither of them had ever had any proof, and most other hunters just laughed the stories off as tall tales. It's not unusual for hunters to have big fish stories. In fact, it's pretty common. Not that I have any, only the truth from yours truly. Swear on me, Mum. It is a catch-all word for anything not alive that's also not a ghost, ghoul, or vampire. You know, zombies, or, in some stories, people who had died in bad ways who had regrets, anger, and refused to go out without getting revenge or finishing what they felt needed finishing. Usually, they came back as spirits, angry ghosts. But here, now the gun was suddenly quite heavy, and I let it pull my arm back down by my side. She breathed a sigh of relief, and gave me another weak half smile. Guess even special, magic bullets can't kill me, huh?
No.
No one knew what could really kill a revenant. There were tons of speculations and thoughts, but because no one had ever actually hunted one, no one knew for sure. Shiloh, are you listening to me? Hello? Movement, inches from my face. My hand snapped out, snagging the slender wrist, and I twisted, instinct taking over, bending the arm back behind her wrist, trapping it halfway up her back. She cried out, her knees buckling, and she hit the hard, creepily-carpeted floor by the time I'd ever realized I'd acted. Hey, ow, ow, let me go. I did, stepping back and trying to pretend I didn't feel heat in my cheeks at the fact that I just assaulted someone who weighed 80 pounds soaking wet. Revenant or not, she wasn't any kind of threat to me, and we both knew it. Rubbing her arm and shoulder, she turned over to flop onto her, her sky eyes filled with anger and tears, her slender chest rising up and down quickly with the fearful breathing of a cornered animal. What the hell was that for? Jesus, what is happening here?
I'm sorry.
You startled me. You always attack people who scare you a little? Yes, actually. I pulled the cigarette pack out of my shirt pocket again, tapped out a second. I don't usually go through more than one so fast, but if I don't need one, maybe a drink, too. Usually people who scare me a little are trying to take my face off, so dash. Point taken. She actually chuckled a little, delicately picking herself up. She wrinkled her nose at the smell of my cigarette, and I lifted my eyebrows in a silent dare for her to say a word. She thought about it, but instead said, I was saying my name is Shiloh. Shiloh. Shiloh Sky Eyes, Shiloh Ravenhair, Shiloh the Undying, Shiloh. It was a perfect name. It fit her like a glove. Shiloh. I said it out loud this time, and it tripped and bounced off my tongue, energetic and sharp.
I'm Zane.
Zane? She cocked her head at me. That's a boy's name. I laughed despite myself. The sound surprised me as much as I think it surprised her. I hadn't had that happen in a very long time. She smiled, though crooked and unsure. You know, she added, I think you owe me a drink, Zane. She took a deep breath, turned and now she met my eyes without flinching, without looking away. She didn't see a predator anymore. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I mean, after you shot me, and held me hostage, and also called me princess. As she got steam under her, I could start to see her personality, what she was under the scared deer. That fire she'd had in my arms was still there, buried, smothered, but there. Do you even drink? Or eat? I feel like that might be the same kind of question as how old is you, or how much do you weigh? She retorted, lips thinning. She looked away, a light blushed on her cheeks. I don't have to. She pulled a shuddering breath, and I watched her brace herself, brave herself up, put on armor to face me, directly in the eyes again, sassy and disaffected. But I could see the shadow behind her eyes, the way she held herself a little more tightly than someone who didn't care would, the way she kept trying not to look at the burning body on the floor or the gun in my hand. But also she was eyeing me up and down. Her lips parted slightly, her pupils dilated, scared and turned on. I think the term for it is scaroused. I chuckled to myself. I'd been told I was hot before, usually by stupid, drunk men right before I stole their wallets. But hey, it counted. On the plus side, I also can't get drunk. She smirked at me, lifting an eyebrow. Which means if I say yes, I mean it. Oh, well, that was forward. That's forward. Most people would be panicking and puking right now, by the way, princess. Your magic bullets couldn't kill me. I'm not most people, tough guy. She gave me a crooked, honest little grin. If you get to pull the stupid nicknames, I do too. I do need a nap, though. A long nap. Then we're going to talk about what happened in here. I need to talk about what happened in here. I wasn't totally surprised. She'd just seen a man die, and honestly, hunters are rare enough that most people don't have experience with us. Don't get how it works. If Shiloh Sky Eyes wanted to chat before she let me bang her, and we headed off on our separate ways, who was I to complain? At least I'd get something out of this. Not worried I'm going to try and find a way to off you. She stopped, and this time her smile turned strained, and those sky eyes danced towards the ground. If you would, she replied softly, let me know. A lot of things I could have said to that. It was heavy. It was hard. She was born of a bad death and clearly haunted by her inability to die, especially if she'd wanted to die in the first place. I got that. Knew what it was like to not see the point in life. I got it. A lot I could have said, but only one possible option that made any sense to go with. I patted her, firmly on the shoulder, stepping over the now smoldering pile of ashes that was the vampire. Okay, Lewis. I drawled, pulling open the door with a dramatic waist-deep bow. I'll be sure to finish you off as soon as you finish your memoirs. She blinked, then laughed softly, surprised, pleased I hadn't pressed the issue, and I liked it, liked her laugh, her smile. It lit up those pale eyes and gave her little wrinkles at the corners of them, and her nose crinkled along the bridge. Her face went wrinkly when she laughed, and it was so imperfect and ugly and all the better for it. Does that make you my Lestat? Last time I checked, Lestat wasn't planning to let Louis die. Her laughter faded, but the smile lingered as she studied my face with a slight tilt to her head. Maybe not, she murmured, and took my offered open door with a playful curtsy. As we stepped out into the fading afternoon light, the pale eyes caught the sun and lit up like a fire had been started in them. They were so pale a blue they reflected the light and sent it back times 1,000. Perfect, pale mirrors. She smiled at me when she caught me staring, blushed despite herself. She really was very pretty, objectively.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.